So, unexpected turn in the US economy. Was Trump right? Here we go.
Donald Trump wants factories to return to the United States. Virtually all of the US president's policies have revolved around this issue. And no, I'm not just talking about the tariffs. There's also the big, beautiful bill with tax cuts for domestic companies, along with the constant push to weaken the dollar. And do you know what? He's actually succeeding. However, you've got to be very careful when you make a wish because it might come true, though not in the way you intended.
America
Okay.
is in the middle
Tell
of
me
a
what-
stealth manufacturing boom.
The industrial sector is
Ooh.
recovering in the US, and this is not only good economic news, it's also vital for the midterm elections. Remember that one of the reasons Trump wanted to bring manufacturing back to the country was precisely for electoral purposes. Over the past
Middle-class
decade,
jobs.
many traditionally left-leaning industrial regions with a strong blue-collar vote have shifted their support to the Republicans thanks to the orange president's proposals. Trump won the last election by a
I mean, like, we are moving towards an era where factories are more and more automated. Um, and so, labor costs, the primary reason in which you would move a factory to China, for example, labor costs are shrinking because the amount of labor you need in a factory is shrinking. And therefore, having a factory in America or having a factory in like China, the difference is getting closer because China, you used to go there because cheap labor, and so it was a better case. But as human labor becomes less important, they're coming closer, and then all of a sudden, the security you get from opening a factory in America or your home country, or for me, Canada. The security you would get from that is starting to outweigh the cost of the slightly cheaper labor because labor is becoming smaller and smaller part of the production cost of whatever it is. And all of a sudden, you can open a factory in your own country, and you get positive feedback from local governments, from the federal government, from state governments, because you're creating jobs, and they all like that. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. And obviously, Trump with tariffs is creating so much trade uncertainty that it's pouring gasoline on what was already happening. And so factories are moving back faster. Now, the fact is the factories offer significantly fewer jobs, significantly fewer middle-class jobs than the factories that left, like the generations ago. But they are coming back.
Narrow margin thanks to poaching these traditionally left-leaning voters, much like what happened with the Hispanic vote. Well, now this issue is once again front and center, given that there are legislative elections coming up this November, elections where Trump faces an uphill battle. But first, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your
I mean, we're gonna be able to tell a lot from the midterm elections in the US.
savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make money beyond your day job, we've got some news for you. At Visual Factory, we've created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you'll learn all of this completely free of charge. Through the link below and this QR code, you can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain, in a clear and simple way, the most essential investment concepts. What multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS, you get the idea. After that, every week you'll you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better, since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique. If you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them, and you won't be able to access them later. With that said, let's get into the video.
I enjoy the self-advertisements significantly more than like when they put in like a VPN ad or like a random advertisement. Like that is something they're trying to build, and for people that are invested, paying the money, getting slightly more invested. Was that one free? I missed it. I probably heard it so many times I just tone it out now. So, anyways, I far prefer this method of advertising when they're actually building something.
What's happening in the US is very strange. The economy is growing. That's true. But while this might seem like good news, it could actually be a sign of a problem. To understand why,
I clicked on this because I thought it was going to be good. Everywhere I click on, it tells me about problems, and this was the first one that was like, oh, the economy might not be doing so bad. And now you're telling me, oh, it might be doing bad? I've been deceived.
To talk to you about the Kuznets curve.
Okay,
this curve, which corresponds to the graph you see on the screen,
we shall understand this percentage of employment in the industrial sector by country and GDP per capita. So the employment share, GDP per worker, numbers. Okay, so employment share of the industrial sector as GDP. Oh. So as GDP per worker continues to increase, the employment share, I think this is automation, right? This downturn right here. You can make an industrial sector worker more productive with machines. And so therefore they create more GDP per worker. But one engineer overseeing 20 machines on an assembly line creates significantly more GDP, but it is only one employee. And in the end, that would reduce your employment share. So as you become more productive in industry, you need less workers. This is the whole thing I was talking about earlier. You're getting to the point down here where you can create huge amounts of GDP, huge amounts of like productivity with each worker. But that means you need fewer of them, and that's why they're coming back.
Basically illustrates that extremely poor countries have almost no industry. That is why they are so poor. Think of Africa or medieval Europe. But little by little, they industrialize and thus become richer. However, there comes a point where the share of industry begins to decline. From this point on, countries continue to get richer, but industry declines in favor of services. In fact, a country like Spain, which is much poorer than the United States, has a much higher percentage of industry in its economy. And this happens in every country. There comes a point where having less industry isn't a bad thing. It's a sign of development toward the service sector.
You still have to be careful with industry. Like when you play Hearts of Iron 4, factories are a very key thing for the whole system. Like having factories in your country under your control, like it's strategic importance, like geopolitical strategic importance. There's a reason why Trump is trying so hard to bring them back. Because if you ever do enter a large-scale war, factories can be retooled so that they produce military goods, and that just becomes the power of the nation. And so you don't want all your factories leaving, but at the same time, once you hit a certain level of development, you want to develop the service sector as well, right?
which generates more revenue, and that's why we say the US situation is so unusual. Until not long ago, Americans were following the trend of other countries, but in recent times, industry has started to increase again. Now, there's an
The other thing about industry is that industry is where you see technological advancements. This is where new methods of production increase output. This is where you will see evolution of industries take place. Like, there's a reason why BYD out of China makes the best electric cars, because that's where all the factories are. And so that's where you've seen the evolution of vehicles, at where the factories are. And so trying to bring that back also brings back the evolution, the advancements, the R&D that naturally happens from having these factories, and having people build new factories and want to do it more efficiently or in a better way.
even more unusual fact in
You need them to be able to build the factories in your own country.
this story. Since Trump entered the White House for the second time, the manufacturing sector has lost about 100,000 workers, while the rest of the economy has gained 300,000.
So they're still losing money. They're still losing people despite manufacturers coming back.
In other words, even though the industry is growing in terms of production, it's losing workers. Furthermore, jobs have been lost in almost every sector of the industry. It's not as if just one specific sector is going through a crisis and that's it.
Let's have a look at this. Can I get those to disappear for a second? No, dismiss. I want to turn them back on. So manufacturing as a whole, lost employment. Durable goods down. Fabricated metals up. Durables down. Machinery down. Transportation equipment down. Computers and electronics way down. Non-durable goods, no idea. Chemicals. Chemicals are up. Fabricated metals are up. Food manufacturing is flat. Plastics and rubbers down. Other non-durables down. Non-manufacturing up. I thought we were looking at manufacturing. Why is non-manufacturing? Okay, that's just confusing.
One specific sector is going through a crisis and that's it. The question is, what could explain all of this? Why is the industrial sector making more money but hiring fewer people?
Automation.
Well, at first glance, one might blame artificial intelligence and robotics, which destroy jobs while boosting corporate profits. But this theory has two major problems. The first is that the United States has very few industrial robots, and it doesn't seem to have stepped up its game in recent years either. We're talking about roughly 300 robots per 10,000 workers, well below Japan or Germany, with 400, China with nearly 500, or South Korea, with 1 robot for every...
Wait. I thought it was robots. You telling me it's not robots? Then what is it?
10 workers. What's more, almost all of these countries have installed more robots in recent years than Uncle Sam, and the share of industry in their economies has not risen. It has continued to decline, as expected. And as if that weren't enough, this argument has yet another problem. It is by no means clear that more automation means fewer jobs in the industry. Take the example of Japan.
In Japan, the decline in robot prices increased both the number of robots and employment by raising the productivity and production scale of robot-adopting industries.
Paradoxically, more robots
I like that.
means more jobs. How is that possible?
More robots means more jobs. Because people that use robots are more efficient. They provide more value. Therefore, they provide more profit. It's easier to profit if they have robots.
Well, because technology can replace us, that's true. But if it can do the same work as us for less money, the product will become cheaper. Consumers will have more money at the end of the month, and they will spend that money on new things. Where do these new workers come from? From the new demand that arises precisely because robots have automated a task. In short, there's no evidence that the United States is betting on robots, but even if that were true, it wouldn't explain why the industrial sector is growing while hiring fewer workers. So what's going on? Well, in
weird.
order to answer that, we have to look to the only developed country in the world that seems to have revived its industrial sector, a country with a disease similar to that of the US, Singapore.
Really?
Since 2020, Singapore has been reviving its industry. Because yes, even though it's well known for its financial sector, its manufacturing sector carries more weight than that of Germany or Japan. In recent years, the government...
This is Singapore? Singapore map. How? Like... Germany, Singapore. What? Let's hear that again. Are you telling me Singapore's got like more manufacturing than Germany?
Its manufacturing sector carries more weight than that of Germany or Japan. In recent...
What? There's no way. More weight clearly is I don't know how he's using that because there's no way it's the same size. Let's just have a look. Wait. Let's see. Is there any like standout buildings? What are you? The wild. You got your own little icon, and that's cool. What's you? Singapore Discovery Center. That sounds like a place we want to drop on. Okay, we're in some kind of industrial district. I want to go to like a residential district. Let's just drop over here. Are you gonna... Oh my goodness, what is that? Your balcony with a little overhang. That's cool. I mean, we have globalized trash collection. I swear those are the same things we've got here. I mean, this is beautiful. That person's just like an Amazon. Look at all those Amazon boxes. Consumer electronics. Ooh, what do we got down here at the end? Oh, is that an embassy of some kind? Did you hire a drunk to paint your roads? What is that? What is that? They got him straight over here. Maybe I mean, like, why? What's this? Ooh, some kind of sports center. Vex. Let's have a look. Look, McDonald's. Even in Singapore, I can get my McDonald's. Not that I've been there in a long time. What is this? This looks interesting. Nope, parking lot. You really, you zigzagged through that whole parking lot? Just to make it look entertaining for me? Go down over here. factory places. You got a Nikon, so you gotta be cool looking, right? Go that way. I mean, like, nice looking city. I think the thing I like about it mostly is like the greenery and the shrubberies. Did it again. Why? It's to indicate slow. Ahead, slow. And so, like, is it supposed to, like, wake you up? Like, oh gosh, look at what happened to the frickin' road. Oh, I like these. I've always liked those. And look at the plants they got up there. That's beautiful. Like, someone's got to manage all of that. It's the same with, like, shrubberies in here and that. And very beautiful looking place. I don't know how it has more manufacturing weight than Germany, given just the size. And like, you want to build an airport? Yeah, there goes like a seventh of your city, just to build yourself a frickin' airport. A seventh of your total land mass. Like, this isn't, that's Singapore, right? That's Malaysia, yeah. Like, that's crazy. How do I find what's up here? That's wild. So this is just golf cart. Guy's like following him. Okay. It's just the massive park or something? Cool. Okay. We're gonna move on. What are they talking about? We were watching this. So an unexpected turn in the U.S. economy. Manufacturing's coming back, but employment isn't increasing.
In recent years, the government has pushed a plan to create
So
something
what's
like a
causing
Taiwan
this?
2.0. Tax cuts, loans with very favorable terms, land grants. The government began offering all of this and much more to companies that invested in high-tech manufacturing, particularly in the semiconductor sector. And here's one important detail. This industrial niche is very capital intensive and labor sparing. Semiconductors are the clearest example. Even a relatively simple microchip can require more than 350 steps to manufacture, all with nanometric precision. And it's clear that a human isn't going to be able to come close to that. And now let me ask you something. Do you remember which sectors destroyed the most jobs in the United States? That's right, computing, electronics, and machinery. Computing and electronics echo what happened in Singapore. On top of that, these are the sectors where industrial production has grown the most, partly thanks to subsidies from Joe Biden's CHIPS Act. Machinery is an exception, because there are still many humans working in this sector. But we can't draw many conclusions either, since almost all the change is explained by two very specific companies, SpaceX and Boeing. SpaceX, for example, combines automation with almost artisanal production, with a highly skilled engineer devoting all their attention to one specific part. And Boeing's sales are soaring, excuse the pun, thanks to geopolitical tensions. It's selling 70% more jet aircraft than
Isn't this the company that is known for, like, planes that crash and burn? Are you telling me their sales are up? Like, they're like all the problems with the aviation industry. I hear that Boeing sales are way up. But I've also heard of a lot of issues with Boeing planes recently. What am I missing?
than 1 year ago. With all this, we already have a good idea of what's happening. It's not that American industry is simply resurging, rather it's shifting toward products with high added value but very little human involvement.
I mean, high added value adding industries is what you want. Like that is good.
In this chart, you can see in which sectors industrial production has increased and in which it has fallen.
Oh. So the only ones it's increased in are computers and electronics. So the CHIPS Act has done a lot. Like it's almost carrying the entire production economy because everything else is down.
Production of electronic goods has skyrocketed, but imports have also grown significantly, a sign that domestic industry cannot keep up. In contrast, in the automotive sector, a more traditional industry, the opposite is happening. Production has fallen by 3% and imports have dropped another 14%, likely due to tariffs. Overall, this isn't really such a big surprise either. American industry was already heavily focused on high value added products. I'm sure many of you have seen videos of 100% automated factories in China, which don't even need to have the lights on because there are no humans involved. The United States doesn't have such flashy facilities, but every worker in the US industrial sector produces 4 times more value than a Chinese worker. The key isn't having the most futuristic factories, but selling the best products. What's more, do you remember the statistic that the US has very few robots per worker? This is often cited as evidence that American industry is highly inefficient, but the opposite is true. In reality, the US focuses on highly advanced products that are typically produced in small quantities, so it's not worth automating the process. It's a somewhat more artisanal process, as we mentioned earlier, except...
So you need to have a certain amount of production before automation becomes viable. Like, if you're creating just one piece, like one airplane, far cheaper just to pay people to build the plane than to create all the robots to then construct you one plane. And so there's a lot of industries where volume is low enough that it doesn't make sense to automate yet.
that instead of traditional artisans, you have to imagine top engineers working with futuristic machines. Machines that are highly advanced tools, not replacements for other workers. Of course, this isn't the entire story. Between 15 and 20% of American industry is food processing, and there aren't any products with extremely high added value in this sector.
Yep.
What it does have is a lot of cheap labor, especially from immigrants. Meanwhile, it's not just that China doesn't have many immigrants who are poorer than the local population. Many poor Chinese from rural areas can't leave their villages without losing their pensions, government healthcare, or even their homes. On the other hand, for historical reasons that aren't relevant here, Chinese universities are churning out engineers by the truckload, so it makes sense to focus on machines and increase automation. In conclusion, in the United States, what we're seeing is a polarization of industry. On the one hand, traditional industry, which relies heavily on labor, isn't growing as much. In fact, in some cases, it's shrinking.
I mean, like, look at that process. What is going on there? So this has got to be like a steel factory, right?
On the one hand, traditional industry, which relies
Like it, when you look into the, like how it's made, you ever seen that old show? It's, some of these things are crazy. Like the process you've got to go
heavily
through.
on labor isn't growing as much. In fact, in some cases, it's shrinking. But on the other hand, we have the high value added industry such as semiconductors. This is the industry that is growing the most. The problem is that this growth does not depend on workers and therefore does not translate into jobs. Herein lies the key to this whole issue. And if you've noticed, we haven't even mentioned tariffs, because what matters is the structural shift in the economy that goes far beyond Trump's policies. And you might be wondering, what impact have the tariffs had on all this? Because as it stands, if Trump's goal was to win votes by creating jobs in factories, that's not happening.
Because there's no jobs. Not
But on the
these
one
factories.
hand, metal production is growing strongly, and imports of these
This is because, like, they've targeted steel and aluminum specifically with higher tariffs. So getting more internal construction of metals was the goal of those tariffs.
products have fallen by 30%, a very clear sign that the production boom is due to tariffs. But the truth is that these products represent a very small part of the industry, and in general, tariffs make the supplies used by other companies more expensive. Or to put it another way, the cost of tariffs causes factories to produce less because they have higher costs. So no, Donald Trump's tariffs aren't achieving their goal. The industry is growing, but only thanks to sectors that aren't very labor intensive. This is simply bad news for the midterm elections. After 2 years, there are no more jobs in industrial areas. As we saw in previous videos, the US economy is in a very fragile state, and it's possible that if the situation doesn't change, those former industrial areas that switched their vote to the Republican side may decide to return to voting Democrat. In any case, now that we've reached this point, it's your turn. Have you been surprised by the industrial...
I want to see that chart again. The one with all the circles. So tariffs are partly to largely responsible for all of these ones going down. Now, metals I don't see on here at all, but they were primary metals? Why are they down? Didn't he say they were going up? Maybe that's not steel and aluminum. It's a different type of metal. Okay. Let's have a look at a couple comments. I like the video. Very misleading. Unexpected turn in the U.S. economy. Was Trump right? No. That's not how it turned out. The areas that are growing and holding up the economy are not very labor intensive, so employment in the sector is still down. If the U.S. economy is fragile, the economies of the rest of the world have foundations based on tissue paper. I mean, like, the whole global economy is built on tissue paper. Robots are just one type of automation. Taking figures in isolation is always misleading. There's a lot of, like, we see a lot of digital automation now. Like, collecting data, analyzing the data, processing the data. That was all used to be done by people. That's largely being done by machines now. And so the robots that we see in factories, that's not the current wave of automation we're looking at. We're looking at the person in an office building is now the guy that's at risk of getting replaced by automation, and not the guy on the factory floor. Returning manufacturing to the United States is not just an economic or job issue, it's also a national security issue. I believe so. I would also note that there's a lag time between factories relocating to the United States and factory jobs returning. Like that's true. But it's been 2 years since Trump's taken office. How much of a lag time do you give them? Like, I remember hearing a lot of promises about, oh, this much investment, this much investment, this much investment, but we don't see that turning into job numbers. Both. Okay, so I was talking about Boeing here. Let me ask the next question. So I've heard Trump talk a lot about investment into the United States and specifically into factories. It's been 2 years now. Why don't I see the increase in factory jobs? Both things are true at once. So I'm talking about Boeing because, you know, like, isn't Boeing at the center of most airplane disasters? Both things are true at once. And the reconciliation comes down to the fact that sales and safety problems show up in completely different parts of Boeing's business. On the sales side, the numbers really are strong. Boeing's total backlog grew to a record $682 billion, primarily reflecting 1,173 commercial airplane net orders in the year. Boeing secured 107 aircraft orders in January. Okay. But the safety and quality issues are also very real and ongoing. Boeing faces ongoing safety and certification challenges affecting production and margins, and it has to reset schedule on the 737 MAX 7 and the 737 MAX 10 variants, as well as the new wide body 777X due to certification pushouts to 2006 and 2017 respectively. I remember, like, whenever I think of airplane disasters, the MCAS issue with Boeing planes is what comes to my head. And it crashed several planes before they figured that out. And that was them being cheap, not wanting to train new pilots, and it led to the death of hundreds of people. Hundreds of plane passengers. And so, I'm not very trusting of Boeing. The FAA still has production cap imposed after a door plug blowout on an Alaska Airlines flight. I remember hearing about that. And regulators continue issuing airworthiness directives. For example, a recent one on the 787 prompted by a Boeing investigation for manufacturing errors and excessive preloading forces at body splice plates. Oh, no idea what that is. So here's what you're missing. It's really 4 things. Orders aren't delivered. 4 things. Orders aren't, deliveries aren't profit. Orders aren't, deliveries aren't profit. An order is a promise years out. The Delta 787s, for instance, aren't due to start arriving until 2031. I mean, you're building planes. You gotta plan long term. Strong orders can pile up while Boeing simultaneously struggles to actually build and certify planes on time. In fact, the safety/quality problems show up precisely there, as delivery delays, certification slippage, and weak margins, not as lost demand. It's duopoly. Airlines aren't what new jets have. Airlines that want new jets have essentially 2 choices: Boeing and or Airbus. I mean, that's the problem right there. You can choose between Boeing or Airbus, and Airbus is sold out for years. Oh, so you have one choice: Boeing. Carriers needing aircraft to meet booming post-COVID travel demands can't simply walk away, so orders keep flowing to Boeing even when its reputation is bruised. Sales strength and financial health are different. Even with record orders, the commercial airplane segment's return to positive margins have been pushed out to about 2027, with this year expecting a negative to be around 7.8 to 8%. Record backlogs coexist with years of cash burn. You telling me they're not even doing well? They have a near monopoly. And they're still getting negative margins? How do you do that with a near monopoly? I mean, since Airbus is sold out for years, you basically have a monopoly. Can't you just sell at whatever price you want? The safety issues are largely about manufacturing quality and certification, not crashes in progress. The recent issues you're hearing about are mostly quality control lapses, FAA scrutiny, and the slow fallout from the 2024 door plug incident. Serious for the company's operation and credibility, but not for the kind of things that make airlines cancel a decade-long fleet plan. In short, demand is genuinely robust because of the duopoly and a travel boom, while the safety story is playing out on a separate, slower track, constraining how fast Boeing can deliver and how much money it makes rather than scaring off buyers. The real question for Boeing isn't whether it can sell planes, it's whether it can build them reliably and profitably enough to convert that record backlog into delivered aircrafts and actual earnings. Okay. I'm not going to go more deeply into that one. Okay. Trump's talked a lot about investment into the United States. It's been 2 years. Why aren't we seeing factory jobs increase? Okay. Here's the short version. The investment is real, but investment dollars and factory jobs are two different things that move on completely different clocks. You're looking for the jobs in the same window as the announcements, and that's not how factories work. Let me break down what the data actually shows. The jobs really haven't grown. BLS data shows about 12.69 million manufacturing workers as of early 2026, down roughly 82,000 net since January 2025. Another read of the same data has it holding near 12.6 million. Okay, so jobs haven't grown, they've shrunk a little. But the investment is also real and enormous. As of April 2026, total committed private sector manufacturing investment stood at about 1.595 trillion. That's not hollow. The money is committed and a lot of construction is genuinely underway. So why no jobs yet? A few reasons. One, announced jobs and payroll jobs are different metrics. This is the big one. Announced jobs are forward commitments tied to projects with timelines measured in years, sometimes decades. When a company says, we will create 10,000 jobs, they mean over the life of a phased construction project that may not reach full staffing until 2030 or later. There's a long gap between groundbreaking and hiring. A semiconductor fab or EV plant takes years to build before it employs production workers. As one tracker put it, 2026 is the awkward middle. The investment is committed, the construction is real, and the employment wave hasn't arrived yet. The jobs will show up in BLS data in 2028, 2029, and 2030, and into the 2030s. The people building the factories show up as construction jobs, not manufacturing jobs, until the plant actually opens. Modern factories employ fewer people per dollar than old ones. Yep, we got that. 4 new jobs are partly offset by losses elsewhere and openings go unfilled. From April 2025 through March 2026, the US lost about 75,000 manufacturing jobs. Though that's less than half the 170,000 lost in the prior 12-month period. Meanwhile, there's a hiring bottleneck. Unfilled manufacturing positions sat at around 474,000 as of March 2026. The constraint isn't only demand for workers, it's finding workers with the right skills. This is the whole decline of hiring. I mean, there's been a decline in training. Companies seek people fully trained for their position rather than hiring someone and training them themselves. And this has been across multiple sectors throughout multiple industries in the economy. Training very rarely happens in a job now. And like, you stop on the job training and all of a sudden you can't find people. The constraint isn't only demand for workers, it's finding workers with the right skill sets. Your factories have stopped training people. If they don't train people, you're never gonna find the right people with the right skill set. Like, people aren't born knowing how to be a factory worker in a complicated factory. This is something that they have to be taught. And the fact is that the standard education system isn't going to teach it to them. The education system teaches standard knowledge. If you want factory knowledge, you kind of have to do that in a factory. And that's just not happening anymore. And so there's a half million unfilled manufacturing positions in the US. That's crazy. So you're not missing anything that contradicts the claim. You're catching the time gap. The announcement describes jobs that are mostly scheduled to materialize at the end of the decade. The construction phase shows up under a different label, and the factory being built needs fewer bodies than the factories of the past. Whether those promised jobs actually arrive and whether the workforce will be trained to fill them is the real open question, and that won't be answered from the data for a few more years. Here's the divergence that's at the heart of your question. So we have the commitment, we have construction, the plan opens, and then full hiring. That's the gap you're noticing in 2026. The country is still in the commitment and construction phase, and the manufacturing payroll figures won't move much until plants actually open and ramp up towards the end of the decade. The promised jobs are real, they're just scheduled to arrive a few years after the announcement. Is there more hiring in the construction sector? Can you give me some figures on that? Because they're saying that the construction, so if this money's been committed and things are actually happening, we should see a noticeable boom in construction because they need to build the factories, right? And so we should be seeing that boom now. Yeah. I liked all those, so I moved that one up, right? Yeah. Okay. Yes, construction has been doing somewhat better than manufacturing on hiring, though the picture is choppy. And it's cooled off recently. Here are the figures. Total construction employment sat at around 8.32 million in April 2026, after roughly 8.31 million in January. 8.29 million in February, March. So the level is essentially flat to slightly up over the year, but the monthly gains tell a more interesting story than the manufacturing numbers did. January, construction accounted for 33,000 of the jobs added nationwide, nearly 1 in 4. March, the sector added 16,000 jobs. April, roughly 4,000 jobs with non-residential construction, up about 2% year over year, driven by surging data center construction. May, the momentum faded. Employment showed little change over the month in construction manufacturing. But like these are 33,000, 16,000, 9,000. There's definitely been a boom in the construction. So early in the year, construction was a real bright spot. But the spring, the gains had thinned out. The May report did not note that hiring is broad slightly across more industries, with gains in construction, manufacturing, and transportation, but only very slightly. A couple of things worth flagging on the figures. The demand for workers is clearly there, even when net hiring is modest. JOLTS data shows job openings increased in construction, and the sector reports serious difficulties filling roles. Among firms with operating for hourly craft workers, 86% of open shop firms report difficulty filling positions versus 70% of union firms. So part of why you don't see bigger headcount gains is a labor supply bottleneck, not a lack of work. This is the issue, right? Like when there's an increase in demand like this, the whole market takes so long to adjust to create more construction workers. Like they do things like this very slow. And here's a nuance that connects back to your earlier question. The recent non-residential strength is being driven heavily by data center construction, not primarily by the factory build-out. The AI/data center boom is a big chunk of what's putting construction workers to work right now. The factory construction tied to those manufacturing investments commitments is in the mix, but it's not the headline driver. And like the factory jobs themselves, much of it is still ramping. So the short version, construction hiring has outpaced manufacturing hiring in 2026, but it's been uneven. It's cooled since the strong start of the year, and the biggest single driver lately has been data center rather than reshoring factories. I mean, for all of what Trump says about bringing back jobs and investment, like, we're not even seeing the construction boom that's supposed to have been created. Like, I understand factories, you gotta plan 6, 7, 8 years in advance from starting a factory to it being production ready and hiring people. Like, this is a longer time scale, but you should see a production boom once you start the time scale, right? And we're not even really seeing that in the US. I don't know. Like, I guess you won't really see anything until 2028, 2029, or 2030. But, I mean, 2028's the next election, right? If you don't see something by then, you're probably going to have a lot of people very dissatisfied with the promises